first BSides presentation for me, so I guess we'll see how it goes. If you guys do want to follow along yourself, this is a totally non-sus QR code that will lead to my GitHub, and there is a PDF there with all the slides and my notes. There's also a Jupyter notebook there, so you can have a look at the code, but don't look too carefully, please. Originally, I put together this presentation for last year's BSides, so I didn't have a look at the code again until this week, and I was like, oh, shit. So, who am I? I call myself an unqualified data nerd. I've unfortunately found myself in the niche of sort of working with seams and seams only, basically. So, I know a lot about getting weird esoteric data and putting it into formats that I never really thought of. You know, getting a binary data from a HMI that's been out of service since the 90s, and somehow being able to shove that into a system that we need. So that's where I found myself now. I work for Tactics Centre, just as a consultant. Currently work on autonomous trains, so that's kind of cool. Proud member of Professionals Australia Union. Guile, talking tomorrow, is also a member. Look, there's a lot of layoffs in the industry at the moment. We're in a union that support IT, cybersecurity workers. You know, NCC's just dropped a whole bunch of people. If this is something you're interested in, come speak with me. And as the shirt says, I never want to work with Kathy again. That's 5 years of my life I won't get back. So, why should I care about metadata? This really comes from a conversation I had with my mum last year at Australia Day. And you know, it's something that I think a lot of us are very familiar with. It's like, okay, well, you know, there's people able to track what we do by using the data about the data that we have. You know, there's stories from 2011 and stuff about Target tracking people's purchases and being able to identify, okay, well, this person is likely pregnant before the person even knows, and that's, you know, a decade ago. And then, you know, WikiLeaks, etc. We all sort of understand these issues, but being able to relate that to my mum, it's kind of hard. And especially when it's like, okay, I theoretically know that these type of things are possible, but really, what can you do with it? How can I do this? And then, fortunately, or I guess unfortunately, big world event happened last year, invasion of Russia, and there's Conti. This isn't a threat intel profile of Conti, but you know, they're a subcrime as service group, active since 2011. When their invasion happened, they said, yeah, hell yeah, we support the Russian government with this, and then evidently some of their members didn't and leaked all of their data. But they presented us with this wide range of data, which really gave me the opportunity to play with data as I wanted to play with the data. And so it gave us about 168,000 unique interactions in some chat logs, which they dropped. And that's 168,000 interactions between 465 actors, and that's a lot of data for any analyst to have a look at. Huge task. But if we could model the metadata about that data, it gives us a place to start and then target our analysis efforts for the future. So diving into the logs, you can see an example of the log there. He's actually saying, hello, is this Patrick? That's kind of cool. But it provides us with enough information to start with our modeling that we want to have a look at. It gives us a timestamp, it gives us a couple of actors who are working from, to and from. And we can use this to have a look at the relationships between the actors. By looking at relationships between the actors, we can start building node graphs, and node graphs gives us a lot of good things to go down the chain. Node graphs are used for all sorts of different things in our lives. Google Maps uses node graphs. I do have references at the end you guys can check out. PageRank uses node graphs. The little linguistics thing there is quite unique. It's for tracking the words used by schizophrenic patients who aren't talkative, and what's the most likely other word that they're going to say depending on who they're talking to. So there's tons of different uses for it, and some uses that we might be familiar with in this room are, Bloodhound. Bloodhound uses node graphs to look at the relationships between different domain objects. If you collect shitloads of seam data, you can build yourself a node graph to have an understanding of what's going on in your network. Basics of node graphs. Let's just say Alice, Bob, Cody, Dan, Eric, they're all at a convention, right? Alice shakes Bob's hand. Cody shakes hands with both Bob and Dan, and Eric shakes hands with Dan and Bob, and hey, look, there we go. We've got ourselves a basic node graph, and we can start to understand the relationships between some of these people. We can do directed graphs, which show dependencies. We can do weighted graphs, which show, okay, how long did they shake hands for. Depending on the data you're collecting, depends sort of on the amount of time that you have to, what information you can get out of it. So for myself, some of the tools that I used here, 3 primary tools. Python, because it's better than doing this in PowerShell, and you might laugh, but that's kind of what I had to do for a while in an old job because we weren't allowed to use Python on our computer, so I did all my data analysis in PowerShell, like that. This one specifically, that's all Python, they're pretty cool. Pandas, it's a Python package, allows you to manipulate data. If you don't know what it is, I highly recommend it. You can take stuff from JSON, put it into XML or whatever, you can push everything to a standard usable format. And then Network X, which is doesn't have a cute animal, and they should be ashamed of themselves. And this is a package made for basically drafting complex networks. Great, so we've got a ton of data. Basically, let's get modeling. I allocated myself about 24 hours to get cracking on this project. It was totally not because I had a university assignment due the next day, so I figured, okay, pack a hoodie on, right? Let's crack the Red Bull and what the fuck is this? Okay, so 18 hours into my 24 hours, I've finally completed the work I should have done before starting modeling, and my housemate found me crying in the shower. So, just a quick tangent lesson for people. And someone over here asked a question to Tristan before about sort of the work you should, the process and things like that. If you aren't familiar with CrisDM, this is, when you're dealing with data of any kind, check out this model. It's got a lot of lessons learned for how you take data and you put it into something. Really what I should have been doing before going into data modeling, that I tried to just jump straight into, is going through this process properly. 3 key steps that you guys should understand: choose the right data, understand your data, clean your data. Collect your data, have a play, explore it. Describe, understand it, make sure you know what you're talking about. And then finally, cleaning data is always the lengthiest task. It's getting rid of all the junk, it's making sure you know what you should be looking at. As a side note, there is a standard for JSON. It's ISO 21778. Developers who don't follow it and just make their own shit up that looks like JSON should be shot, and I'm not taking any questions on that. There's very little code in this presentation, I promise you. This is very simple. There's basically 3 steps if you're going to try and create a graph in Network X. First one is, identifying the nodes at the top. We're saying, okay, everyone who's to and from, there are unique actors, there are nodes, they're the people who are important. Then we create the graph structure, and then kind of, we want the people that have the most conversations to be bigger circles, so that's the thing at the bottom there, steps 7, 8. And so great, now we're going to have a pretty graph, and it's going to give us all the information that we ever want, and graphs with this many nodes really become tricky to purely use as analysis tools. The magical answers that you really think you're going to get into when you start graphing like this aren't really going to get from those 9 lines of code, but there are some small tricks that we can look at. We can manipulate the data. There's tons of things out there, and this was before ChatGPT came along, so I was trawling Stack Overflow for hours trying to find the right things that I was supposed to do, but it's a lot easier now. And now we've changed it into sort of a directed graph with, okay, we still have our larger nodes that are important, but we also have weighted lines about how often people talk to each other. And we can clearly see that, okay, there's a lot of these tiny dots which are irrelevant. We have some big players who are significant assets that we should look at, and we have some people in between as well who might be team leaders or something like that. But graphing is really just the means to an end. What you really want to do when you're graphing stuff, when you're looking at this amount of data and having an assessment of these relationships, is you want the statistics, and you want to understand centrality. Centrality tells you who is important in a network, and this gives you the starting location if you're going to conduct your analysis. It doesn't matter if you're doing your analysis on a group of people, or you're doing your analysis on domain objects, or you're doing analysis on network traffic or whatever. These centrality statistics will tell you hey, this is probably a good place to start, and then I can build my hypothesis from there. Degree represents the exposure that a node or an actor and a person will have on a network. It essentially is their opportunity to directly influence the rest of the network behavior. Closeness, that really shows who diffuses information to the network, essentially. Betweenness is a good show of informal power. So if they're sort of in between wide parts of the network. Eigenvectors are another thing. It's really good for dense networks, and this is where you start getting to really heavy algorithms that we don't have to worry about because we have Python packages that do it for us, and we don't have to think about math. But that's really a great way to show, another way to show informal power. Practically, what that looks like is this. So here's a semi-complex network. The node with the highest degree, the most connections, that's the red node there. The node that's technically closest to all other nodes, that's the yellow node. And the purple node is the one that's in between that most people have to travel through if they're going from one side of the network to another. So if I was to have a graph like this with some data, these are the nodes that I would look at to target my analysis, and then, okay, now I can go have a look at these people's chats. Now I can go have a look at what data these nodes are generating, that type of stuff. Gathering statistics, again, trivial because we just let a Python package do it for ourselves and don't think about maths. And we come out with some statistics like this. Now this is from the actual Conti data, and we can start pulling out stuff about like degree, closeness, betweenness. There's a few nodes with very high authority, the degree, you can see there, so you can see Defender and Stern, huge authority margins over everyone else. Really, that's showing these are the highly influential networks. They're the center of information. These are probably the bosses of the crew. It also shows the network probably isn't highly resilient. You know, if you might have been a law enforcement person looking at this data, if you say, okay, well, these are the nodes that I could, these are the nodes I could take out to try and take down this network. The closeness kind of starts middling, but trends down rapidly, and kind of shows that this there isn't a lot of regular contact across the network, right? It's probably highly in cells where these individuals here have control of their own groups. Interestingly, it doesn't look statistically significant, but I had to cut it down to fit it on PowerPoint, but there was like 9 digits there. But you know, Bentley jumped up compared to his degrees, and we have a professor coming in. And why are they more important when they had lower degree? And that's now something as you as an analyst can say, okay, these figures don't match up. Is this someone I should look at? Are they important? Maybe they serve as middle managers of some kind. Maybe they have larger teams than other people that aren't as important though. And then betweenness, the Defender and Stern basically blow everyone out of the water. This is a network where these two individuals have control of everyone else and no one talks to anyone else. Right? To go from one side of the network to another, you have to go through these two people. So already we're starting to categorize the Conti group and understanding, well, based on these statistics, we can see what they're all about. More than that, we can start looking at trying to find communities within a network. This graph pretty clearly has 2 different communities, right? But it's a little bit harder when you have a dense graph with 460 nodes or so. If you're going to try and do a graph like that, it'll look something like this. I've pulled out all the names because it made it really confusing, so I've only included the top 8 per degree based on what we had, but it's still gives us some very interesting data. Because we have so many nodes, community detection is difficult to apply. And what community detection looks at is, okay, who does the node mostly speak to? Who do they mostly interact with? Who do they mostly talk to? And that allows us to say these people are probably part of the same team, same community. So the algorithms don't work well when you have sort of low betweenness and that type of stuff. So we can start saying, okay, as an analyst, what happens if I drop certain nodes? What happens if I drop Stern or Defender from this list? How does the community shake out? Will I start to see more communities of lower ranked individuals congregating together? Because Stern and Defender heavily interact with every other node, it's it's really shaking up the data. Mango and green, you can see at the top, are the only ones who aren't part of the two core groups. So you can see Defender, Hoff, Buzzer, they're all part of the same community. Stern, Bentley, Reverse, they're all part of the same community, but we have Mango and Green as their own ones. So that sort of lends heavily to the theory that we put together before that, hey, these are middle managers probably. They probably have their own teams that they manage, right? But because the high authority for those few other individuals, it meant that they're all part of the same sort of leadership group. And then there's other interesting things. You know, we have orange. I'm not actually sure how well that colour shows up at the back, but there's a couple of orange dots out there which don't have a name for them, right? Why are they there? Who's important in this group? And that's another thing that we need to start having a look at to analyse. Fortunately, as I said, I prepared this talk for last year, and then since then there's been tons of analysis on this topic. So I went through, I had a look at credits on security, did like a 4-piece massive deep dive into Conti, Forescout, Checkpoint, Rapid7 all released in-depth reports on the data from the leaks. And these are some of the takeaways from it. And we can see that our statistical analysis based on statistics and on the node shakes that pretty well with what people are having a look at when they're actually looking at the content of the chats. Right? Stern, identified as a leader of the group, described as a CEO, right? Defender, another senior member, described as the CAO, that works offside Stern. They handle the finance, logistics, etc. These two are our leaders. Bentley, Buzzer, Mango, high authority individuals, likely shown to be sort of middle managers with their own community. So based just on what we looked at a high level with a couple of lines of code and a couple of statistical things, ignoring the crying in the shower, we were able to identify, hey, these are the important individuals without going through all the effort of translating all the chats and reading through every single one, right? And we could have said, okay, I want to know more about these two leaders of Conti, go through and just translate that, and palm it off to one analyst and say, hey, you can deal with that problem, that's yours now, my work is done. So if there's any takeaways from this, what I really want you to think about is consider these node graphs and having a look at the metadata and things like that when you're building your own analytical methods, right? Consider when you have a ton of data, the best thing to do is just play with the data, right? You want to explore what you're looking at, add, remove, chop, change, try new things. Quite often you'll find yourself, hey, I have all this data, I'm coming up with a conclusion. Well, what happens if you remove the key data for your conclusion? What's the next thing that comes along? Well, if you're going to graph stuff, centrality is the most important thing, not looking at the actual graph. Centrality gives you the metrics for you to conduct further analysis. You remove key nodes, what new pathways are you going to discover? What new communities might you discover? What key individuals are showing up in the statistics that you can pull together? And then finally, try and understand the communities within the group. You can tear it apart, you can find, okay, who's the core of this group? What outside communities are there? And you can take these little packages together and you can say, okay, well, this is going to be one analyst job and this one's going to be another analyst job. Really easier way to divide the work rather than going through all the data itself. References, again, if you were brave enough to do QR code, this is on there. If you want to have a look at it. Honestly, the 24 hours thing wasn't a lie. I learned how to, go through and do all this in 24 hours. You can imagine people who, if you are concerned about your metadata, whose their entire job is to do that, what they can know, what they can discover, right? But this is also something that's very easily accessible due to the fact of how much work is done by the standard packages out there these days. I hope this has been enlightening for some people, or at least for a new technique or a new tool that you could start incorporating into your own workflow. Are there any questions? Yep.
With the link to Conti chats, has there been any kind of discussion in the chat or evidence of groups like that changing up how they communicate or get together or form those kind of mini communities, or are they much staying up?
I'm sorry, I don't know widely what other groups are doing. This was sort of purely a data analysis exercise into this group. Sorry. Yeah.
I think it's important to understand the fundamental assumptions. The analysis you're looking at sort of suggests that the CEO is the one who communicates the most. But perhaps it might be the other way around, where the CEO gives one instruction, but then sort of his instruction is maybe go and hack the enemy, and as that gets filtered down through the organisation, those communications get more chatty.
Yeah, no, that's that would definitely be practical for a lot of things that we see, and that's the data doesn't always tell the full story. The statistics don't always tell the full story. So you could say, you would do the graph, you'd pull out the centrality and stuff like that, and you'd say, hey, this, rather than saying, okay, this person's the biggest node here, so they're the boss, right? You'd say, hey, this node is the biggest person. They are someone important in the network. They might not be the boss, they might be a technical leader, they might be some sort of SME or an expert or stuff like that, or they might just simply be a middle manager and get their instruction from somewhere else. But now you have a target to focus on, and you can focus your analysis on that rather than trawling through the data itself. Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's very cool with this technology, with the algorithm, just plug everything into it, and it will actually find some patterns for you to give you that starting point to start your investigation.
Yeah.
You've got so much, so these vast amounts of data, but being able to actually show you patterns and groupings and things like that, it just gives you that ability to tick off and drill down.
Yeah. We're becoming a more and more connected world. There's tons of data coming out there. For those of us who work in security operations and collecting data from different places, you're getting buckets and buckets of it. Understanding these techniques and tools, which might not be built into your standard security tooling and packages, that you can incorporate into your analysis and into your security workflows, I think is important for everyone. And I really hope some people have found something interesting that they could find time to look into in the future. Anything else, or I'll let you guys go to lunch? Yeah.
Just a quick one. Did you do any analysis on the types of conversations that took place? See what the conversations were about?
At the time when I did the original data, it was all in Russian, and I didn't have the effort to go through and actually do the translation, which is why I was focusing on the metadata itself to say, okay, if I wanted to do further analysis on this, who would I focus on? But now there's tons of GitHub repos out there where people have already gone through and translated it, so if you wanted to, you could do that analysis yourself. All right, thank you. Any other questions?